The history of CIRS, which stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome, it was discovered in 1997 by Dr. Richie Shoemaker in Maryland. So in the history of illnesses, less than 30 years old is pretty young. But in that amount of time to be able to have substantial amounts of validated, proven research on the treatment and causation of illness is substantial. But also it's pretty young. So I mean, like I said, we were there having new research presented of new things that are coming up that they're learning of how to be more effective with this illness to help people get to graduation, which is possible, which is the other kind of fascinating thing in the medical world is there are thousands of patients that have been diagnosed with this condition that are no longer living with it in a disease state. So one of the things most of you have met with me that I tell you that I love about it when it comes to health guesswork with treatment. That doesn't mean it's easy. It means we have a roadmap that we can go by that's validated and proven. So a couple things as far as an overview of tonight. We are going to have a review of what CIRS is. Again, I think a lot of you have heard that, and from me and from a lot of us, but I think repetition is good, especially with something new or different than what we hear out there. We will talk a little bit about the Shoemaker protocol, which is the proven, validated protocol to eradicate CIRS. We're going to talk about home testing and viable home testing, and some of this will be some of the new things that have come about in this space that we learned in depth this weekend. We're going to talk about Actinobacteria, Genie, Neuroquant, Marcons, and then we'll finish tonight talking about what it means, these next steps, which I think everybody thinks about and asks about, myself included, to what is medically important remediation, what does that mean for each of us? And then I want to touch on some of the things we do here from a functional medicine support perspective that are aiding in this process dramatically. So what is CIRS? So again, CIRS stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and most of you again know or have heard at this point what that means. I like to just break that down. Chronic meaning for a long time your immune system has been responding in a way that it wasn't made to. The key factors in this is it has to happen inside of a person who has a genetic susceptibility to not be able to identify or eliminate biotoxin with exposure to biotoxin. So the HLA, which we run labs for and test for, shows us whether the patient has a genetic predisposition as part of the diagnostic process. One of the things that really stood out to me this weekend is they talked about so the biotoxin exposure, traditionally mold, but there are other things, but caused by water damaged buildings. One of the stats that they said this 2 weekends ago that stood out to me is they know that 24%, it says world's population, but 24% of Americans will have this HLA. The EPA, which stands for the Environmental Protection Agency, estimates that half of the buildings in the United States are water damaged, and that's reported. So if you do the math on our population, that means approximately 50 million people are living with CIRS in the United States undiagnosed. And then when we get to a slide that shows what are common misdiagnoses or things that are diagnosed as CIRS, you start to realize this is probably way more a reality and an epidemic out there than we think it is or give credit to it. And then again, the cool part is that we actually do have a protocol that is validated as peer-reviewed literature to treat this disease. So here's not a complete list, but a very thorough list of common misdiagnoses or diagnoses that are real, but have been shown to have causation from CIRS. And we can go down the list. Things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, MS, depression, stress, allergies to anything, PTSD, somatization, irritable bowel syndrome, attention deficit disorder, including ADHD, OCDs. 95% of autoimmune patients have CIRS. And we won't go over it tonight, but in the biotoxin pathway, you understand it can kick off and trigger autoimmunities to happen. If you've heard of the neurological condition POTS or pandas, often in pediatric patients, there are studies that have shown that 100% of those conditions can be drawn back to CIRS. Chronic infections such as UTIs, candida, chronic sleep issues, chronic gut issues and GERD, chronic ulcerative colitis, even SIBO type infections, chronic histamine reactions, and sinusitis, and chronic pain. I can tell you, I have seen every single one of these in office and have run the biomarkers in the labs and can confidently diagnose them with CIRS. Now, this does not mean that you don't have to do some things to still treat and manage these. But once you can identify a root cause and go after that, your support of these and from traditional healthcare perspectives gets easier and or more effective. So in CIRS diagnosis, we have something that's called a cluster symptoms. Basically, it's 31 symptoms. You have to have 8 of these clusters positive to be diagnosed with CIRS. All of you have seen this if you've been sat in my office. The thing that I think about when I look at this list is you can have 20 patients in an office that all have the diagnosis of CIRS, but their symptom profile is very different. Each of them will have a different symptom profile. And so this is why, as you look at this list, you can have anything from neurological to cardiovascular to hormonal to gut-related issues to pain to anything in between. The most common things are fatigue, difficulty concentrating, the brain fog, the memory impairment. Those are the most common. But I will tell you, I've also seen every single one of these symptoms and very different mixtures of these symptoms in every patient that I've sat down with.
And how many do you need?
So 8 of the different clusters to be, now this is part of the screening diagnostic process. There's other pieces. But when you look at this list, most people sit down and look at this and they're like, oh yeah, that's me, and that's me, and I didn't think about that, but yes, that's it. Especially as you start going down this list and thinking about some of those. What's been cool and fascinating for us in our office is we've been educating our staff. A lot of those of you that don't know, downstairs we have a very musculoskeletal rehab driven part of our clinic. And as our clinicians down there are getting used to this, chronic pain is on this list. We've had some patients that the chronic pain is just not going away and going away. This joint pain, this morning stiffness, this cramps, and we start asking other questions to diagnose this route and treat this, and their chronic pain goes away. So, so this is what CIRS can look like. I will often call this CIRS, but a lot of these chronic illnesses and infections, I call them a silent illness. And what I mean by that is a lot of patients who are dealing with this deal with any mixture of this. Yeah, you still get up, you go to school, you take your kids to school, you go to work, you go to church, you put on a good face, you do all the right things. You've been told your labs look normal and no one can figure out what's going on. And then you go home and you're dealing with all this. And you don't want to get out of bed, you can't get out of bed. If I can use what you shared with me, feel like you're a carcass dragging yourself from day to day, activity to activity, just trying to get by. But then somebody says, hey, how you doing? And it's like, great, fine. But this is what's going on underneath the surface. And so CIRS gives us answers and gives us some keys to this. So continuing this, so it's an inflammatory reaction. This is huge. So what's a big delineation that has to be made is CIRS is not a disease of infection. So it doesn't mean you have mold floating around inside your head. It doesn't mean it can cause allergies. It's not an allergy. It is a disease of immune reactivity. Meaning what CIRS is your immune system is reacting on overdrive chronically. And what I like to tell people is the off switch is broken. And so, and it's secondary to water damage and biotoxin illness. Now, these are some of the most common. Ironically, if you read Dr. Shoemaker's book, how he discovered this, they actually discovered it in bad fish in the Chesapeake Bay with Listeria. But the website's called Surviving Mold because most of the research has been there, but I'll say in the last probably 3 to 5 years, they've come to find out that things like bacterias, which we'll talk about a few of them, endotoxin, which translated into layman's term is poop, so sewage, septic tanks, cat litter boxes that don't get cleaned out well, things like that. Some of those can even be more immune reactive than even some molds can be. And so, so there has to be exposure somewhere. Now, what's hard about this is some people know. Some people can say, oh, I remember we lived in this house and everybody started getting sick and sugar plague. Some people don't. And I will always teach and caution patients to be careful of the witch hunt to try and find it. Because sometimes you can get caught up on like, man, when did this start? You can't focus on the first step to go forward because you're looking so far backwards. But what we know is there had to be some exposure sometime. The most common source can be the home, or is the home. I will tell you though, I have seen here in Utah, most of us know this, like algae bloom in our lakes and reservoirs is real. And I have actually seen an acute case of CIRS where the patient had known Lyme exposure, went swimming at Bear Lake, and the next day started coming down with neurologic symptoms. He got diagnosed with Guillain-Barré. He was having his nerve function from the legs up was going away, and we were able to catch it and help do some things and drastically change it. So this can be more often it's chronic, but it can happen that quick sometimes. We'll get into this in a minute, but step 1 of the Shoemaker protocol is removal from exposure. And so, you know, again, I'll talk because these gentlemen were with me. The biggest obstacle to graduation is a graduation or being able to get through the process is not getting through exposure or getting out of exposure. One of the top mold inspection companies spoke there, and the owner of the company said if he had $1 for every time somebody told me they didn't have mold in their home, he could retire a wealthy man. So a validated home test is essential to make sure that you are not going into exposure and sleeping there every night. This is just a quick little Dr. Shoemaker, 2 idiots, he's still around. He spoke this last weekend. Dr. Dorninger is kind of his number 2. There's him and another doctor, Dr. Shoemaker, or Dr. McMahon, who are the co-founders of CIRS. I work really closely with Dr. Dorninger, and Dr. Cosgrave does as well. He's treated over 1,000 patients with this successfully to quote unquote graduation. And I mean, I talk to him weekly, and a lot of times about a lot of you guys, especially some of the complex things that don't follow the rules the way that they're supposed to, which that's kind of like, congratulations, that's what this process is. But the hope and the reason that I want to kind of share, I think the reason this is in there is there are thousands of patients across the country that are getting through this and living lives absent of their symptoms and back to where they need to be. Okay, so this is the Shoemaker protocol from the ground up. Step 1 is the hardest step of the whole process. But that doesn't mean you don't start step 2 and keep going until step 1 is done. And I'll show some information later about things that we're doing, which again, we got some interest and excitement in the CIRS community about how we can continue to help immune systems and help your body heal and change while we're trying to figure this out. This isn't like a 2-week process. And what I love is you look, everything's objective. And so we run the labs on all of this stuff. So if you have Marcons, we have to do the right work to eradicate it. If you don't, we don't do it. And then you work your way up through the process. The last step, which is not on here, is proof of living without the medication and supplements. So can you return to life and be there and know how to handle things where you are now? But again, this is a validated, proven process that we go step by step through with every patient. So top causes of water damage, this is just something to put on here because again, you know, after hearing a guy that's, you know, their company's inspected thousands and thousands of homes and the number of people tell them they've never had this, If you read and look, you can have microbial damage that can cause immune reactivity within 24 hours of water leak. Somebody asked, is this a problem if you take care of the water immediately? And the response is, well, what's immediately? Like 5 minutes? Whatever, because the reality is we can start having. The reality is most of the stuff we don't even know about until days after. And so this is why I was speaking to the inspectors. They always interview the patient for the owners because they'll say, "Oh no, we don't have any problems," and then they'll start asking questions like, "Oh yeah, the roof leaked like 4 years ago." Yeah, it's like stuff happens. We know what happens. And there's some even crazier ones we could go through, but these are some of the most common ones that. The testing home. So why is it important? One, like we said, we've got to know if you're living in a. And then it's a complex conversation about what to do next. But what's crazy about this is those who have done this know you're not swiping and swabbing visual mold or water damage. You're actually collecting dust samples. And the reason why is because we're not actually looking at mold. They want to test to see, call it particulation. So that the mold, that the bacteria is produced particles, not even spores. By the way, spores are not reactive, it's the particles that they produce. And those get in the air and settle in the dust. And we have the right number of the right kinds that are proven to be reactive. So if you've done this, you're dusting the tops of door frames, tops of bills, tops of fans. This is where dust is collected. And putting the swabs in, and you're us what the level of every single strain, and it's in depth. You can put them, it's 20, 30 strains or more, and are the levels such that they're causing reactivity. And so what's important is these tests show us one, are there particles, are there species in your home that are causing immune reactivity? And then there's steps to take from there. So I don't have any affiliation with you guys. The Envirobiomics, this is who we recommend to everybody because they have done the lab work to test and validate that what they have, what their tests show measurement of is what's in your home causing immune reactivity, or is it just there? And so the recommendation is 1 kit per floor, per option. Once you send it to them, it takes about a week or so to get the. We're doing this in our home level. So, I don't know where the slide is, but one thing I wanted to talk about this is one of the things I went over this last weekend, and it's been brought up a number of times before, but I went into it more detail than I've heard in the past, is why air sample testing is not a valid way to test. Whoever has had somebody come in their home and test for mold ever. So not a lot of us, we have, and it's actually, they come in and they hold like this little gun up and kind of and I've seen some little things that collect air, they call them air spore traps. And so they're not validated because they just show a number of spores in the air. They don't show the species, the amount, and if it's reactive. And the other thing too is they'll test them when nobody's walking around in the home. But you can have a test when the home's empty and there's nothing floating around in the air, and they're going to get nothing back and say your home's. And talking now for the last year, probably all over a year now, I've spoken with multiple testing companies, multiple remediation companies, and this sounds funny, but the mold world is slimy. And I've literally had remediation companies tell me that, look, what you want us to do for your is way too complex. That we do a crappy air test that says something's there, we charge to do remediation, and we do another crappy air test that says what we did worked, and we don't care. And I've talked to patients who have gone through this and moved back into their home after they spent X amount to do this, and they're still sick. So it's crucial to do this the right way. There's 3 board members of CIRS who actually for the organization that certifies remediators nationally. And they no longer teach air as a viable option because it just doesn't show us what we do. And so basically it said if you go in and do an air sample and it comes back positive, we dig deeper. If it comes back negative, we dig deeper because it shows us. So what to do after the test? So a couple of things. So the home test is going to come back with 3 reports, and those that get them, and I've gone through a couple of them with you guys, but I'm happy to sit down and explain what they mean. It's going to show all the species of mold, what their numbers are, and if they're immune reactive to humans or not. It will show Actinobacteria. We're going to talk about this in a second. This is a bacteria that is activated via water damage, but is actually cultured under steam. And which ones are, if they're above a certain number, we know they're immune reactive. And same with endotoxin. And so in the dust, we will see if there are samples of endotoxins that are at a level that are making you sick. So, yes.
Do you know the approximate cost for the test?
Yeah, so the test is $565 for one kit.
One for each floor.
So the recommendation is ideally 1 for each floor. If you're only going to do 1 floor for financial or other reasons, they recommend basement. Just because the basement is the highest place that can come in, et cetera. So the ideal scenario is 1 for 4. But if you're only going to do 1, hard part is we've had people only do 1 floor and come back good, but they're not living down there, and so it is a conversation. I'll tell you, we are swabbing all 3 floors, all 3 floors. This is Jenna has a kit out here.
Are you taking me to basketball?
You do this kit. You have 3 swabs.
I'm so tired. Can Dad take you?
Each one, I did call the company to clarify the right way to do it. You take each one, and you're going to do 10 areas with each one. So I just took all 3, and like you do this one, the 2 with this one, and the 2 with the next one. And then when you're done, you want it to be fairly dark. So I have been saving my ceiling fan dust for months, so I could get this beauty. So you can see it is pretty dark, and they do say you want it to change color. And you want the entire, you've done it, you want the entire rag as dark as you can get it. So that's how you do it. And then we did do 1 kit for each floor. So this is my basement kit. And
Yeah.
down the rest, so.
So did you do 1 swab just on the ceiling fan, 1
So
for
each spot needs 10 different locations. So I literally went from room to room and did each one in the same spot. Because, so this is your mold rag, this is your endotoxin rag, and this is your actino rag. And so they want, you can't just do the actino one in one room, the endotoxin one in another room. You should tell what endotoxin is.
We already did.
Okay. Because you want all the samples to be able to test all 3.
I don't understand how a septic tank. How does that work?
So the short answer is if there's any type of backing up, but it's the gases of it that can back up. So I've heard multiple stories where, so like if you go down, so if you have a septic tank or even just sewage, if you go down in your basement, you'll have a little drain in the bottom. And depending on where you live, how it's constructed, all that type of stuff, if there's one case that I heard where the neighbor had a backup, but their pipes were connected and the gas was coming up into their home, making them sick. That's probably more the most common. I heard a really, really strange case where this was actually one of Dr. Dorninger's patients where they did all the appropriate testing, remediation, all the things, but were still sick. I can't remember the name of the test, but it's basically they put like dry ice in your sewer pipes, and the smoke from the dry ice was coming out from a wall, and they cut the wall open, and one of the sewage pipes in the wall had been leaking. And they fixed that, repaired it, and my patient was totally fine. That was like the thing. More common would be, they say this all the time, like cats with litter boxes, if don't get changed regularly, that will kick it off. This is like the gross one that you don't really want to talk about, but it's like if dogs doing the boo scoot boogie across the carpet, you know what I'm talking about? Like, I mean, you got to start thinking about this stuff. But that's where like sewage and septic tank stuff comes into play. By the way, patients that this is like their thing. I've been in this where you're like walking through a parking lot and there's like a sewer drain and that smell comes up. Patients, that's their thing. That smell enough will kick them into a CIRS flare. It's that bad. So that's endotoxin. Yes.
About the test, is it better to do the wipes or the vacuum?
So wipes is preferred.
Okay.
Because they want you to be able to test multiple areas. They used to, so I just actually overnight, literally, had some conversations about, because they did some testing with vacuum, where they had the patient vacuum sealing the walls and floors at a certain interval over time, and the Swiffer came back way more validated. So.
Did you do the vacuum or the Swiffer?
We did the vacuum one.
So it's not a bad test, okay, and it's still helpful. So, so actinos, we're going to talk about this in a second. It's a little out of order. Actino is a bacteria that grows on the skin. If this comes up on your in your home as positive, this is where part of the diagnostic process, we order a skin swab, and you swab this behind your ears and send it off to see, is it you that's culturing it, or is it something else in the home? This is something we can get into on a case-by-case basis, but let's talk about what these are. So the first bullet probably means little to most people, but this is a bacteria that acts like a mix of a bacteria and a fungus. And so just like staph and other things that grow on our skin normally, whether you know it or not, you all have stuff on your skin. But there are strains of staph, there are strains of actinos that can be pathogenic or immune reactive, and there's ones that can be benign and just live there. And so this is why the home test helps us, because we can see if certain ones are high, we know there's immune reactivity, actinos living in the home, and different than mold. So mold needs water and paper, which is, you know, what we build our homes out of. Actinos need water and oil, the oil on our skin to grow. And so this, by the way, is admittedly, and I've gone back and have done a lot of study in the CIRS community on actinos. It's something they've talked about the last several years, but I will say in the last year is where they've really started to do some research and realize that actinos may be just as immune reactive, if not more, than mold in a lot of patients. Yes.
Are they common like in the kitchen area where you might have splattered oil or something like that?
Well, so no, they're going to come from water damage, and then they're going to grow on you. So that's why if it comes up in your home, it's because it's been on you and you're kicking it off. I mean, all this stuff is kind of gross, but like it's real, right? And so we have to swap. If it comes back high in the home, it's coming from some human in the home. So you swab to make sure it's you, and then if it's you, what do you do about it? So the most common symptoms are when to consider this as part of the diagnosis. These are three of the main things that they have found contribute and are caused by actinos: with chronic fatigue, with brain fog, memory issues. Another one that was explained to me over the weekend too was the depression and mental health issues. Actinos are a huge driver of those types of things. One of the reasons why this is here, and this I'll simplify this for everybody. Does anybody remember in high school biology what we call the mitochondria? You can't answer this. Does anybody, what?
Powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah, powerhouse of the cell. Mitochondria is what makes ATP, which is energy. So what actinos do, they produce a protein that actually blocks the channels of the mitochondria, that all the ingredients that are supposed to go in there to make energy, actinos block all those pathways. So basically all the stuff can't go into your mitochondria to produce energy. So then chronically over time, we've got fatigue, we've got brain issues, and the list goes on and on. Early studies are showing the things that help this the most, and I've been talking with the CIRS main doctors about things that we're going to do to help this. Defense soap, and we will be getting some and a code for people who want to try this. This was actually a soap that was created by the wrestling community to help kill ringworm and MRSA, which for those of you that aren't familiar with wrestling and martial arts, it's very, like, they just know that's just part of what they accept when they do those sports, because the mats they roll around on are, you know, gross. And it's one of the only things that's been proven to kill those. They make soap, laundry detergent, etc. We are doing some work with them with the Hocket to see which creates transdermal ozone. So being able to use ozone to fight what's on the skin. One of the other things too, there's a brand of air filters that's the only air filter that's passed all the CIRS testing as far as eliminating small microbes from the air. The company's called Air Oasis. The iAdapt, they've shown when they put those in homes of people that have actinos, their symptoms and their actino scores on the skin swab drop dramatically. And so, yes?
The Air Oasis have 25% off through midnight.
But we're going to be working with both of those companies to try and get discount codes for our community here. And admittedly, and again, Dr. Cosgrave, this one, not this one, can share, he's there. I mean, they're sharing some early studies and research that this stuff's improving and helping. And this is what's interesting when you dive in, have a research community, is they're going to say, hey, look at all the amazing stuff this is doing, but we don't know if this is the answer yet. But the short answer is it's actually drastically changing scores objectively and patient symptoms by washing with the soap regularly, using the iAdapt. We've got a number of patients here that if I knew, and we knew how to test actinos 6 months ago before we started to put them in the Hocket, I bet they were positive, and I bet they weren't positive. So we're going to start doing some work with that as well here.
So if one person in your family has the Activa, that one?
Yes.
You probably all, like, right?
Not necessarily, actually.
Okay.
So that's what's crazy, is you could, but your spouse could not. And again, if you don't have the HLA and the ability to not identify and remove, you could have it and it could not cause immune activity, and you never know. There's probably a dozen or so cases of people who have gotten super crazy and swabbed their dogs. There's been some positive tests with dogs on actinos too. So, but yes, so this is what's crazy, is this is one where you could have a family of 5, but only one person's culturing it. This is also why they'll have patients who do everything for mold, or they move into a brand new construction house and still have symptoms, because if they're culturing it on them, they're bringing it. Okay. This is not meant to like create fear, discouragement, or whatever. If anything, this, like, for me, learning about this over the past 3 or 4 months or so, as I've been working, so Dr. Dorninger is one of the main ones doing research on these, and again, I've been talking about this extensively. This is like unlocking another door to help people who are plateauing in their care. Because if they're doing all the right stuff, but this has opened the door to help get breakthroughs through people that there hasn't been before. So if anything, to me, this is more exciting to know how to identify what's going on for people who can't progress because they didn't know this was going on. Okay, so we talked about this. So if the home score comes back positive for actinos, we do the skin swab test and to see if it is growing on your skin. Two other ways that help us really know how to be even more detailed of which biotoxin is the one that's causing the symptoms. So there's a brain MRI that you can do called the Neuroquant. I've done this on myself, my family. We've done this with a few patients. And I will even say in the last year, this has been around and they've been doing it, but this has even increased in validity in diagnostics of CIRS, really because of these two right here. So if you do a Neuroquant, and I should have brought mine in to show you, but, and this actually, by the way, has helped change this community a little bit. So what the Neuroquant does, you do a brain MRI and they measure, they do it at the time of the MRI, they measure different areas of your brain and they measure to see if there's atrophy, if there's asymmetry. And what they've learned that if there's a certain pattern, tells us if you've had brain atrophy, so meaning shrinking of your brain due to mold exposure, due to Lyme disease. And if I can share your story, so Jenna was treated, a lot of you know this, but went through, she probably had undiagnosed Lyme for 16 years, was treated for Lyme disease. And her brain MRI actually showed nothing that had to do with Lyme, but everything that had to do with mold. So you get a mold and a Lyme score, but what they've learned and validated more over the last year is if the other thing this tells us, it gives us which nuclei or which areas of your brain are atrophied. And if it's 3 or more, you have to include actinos or endotoxins on the list. So I've had patients whose mold and Lyme scores on Neuroquant come back negative, but they have multiple atrophic nuclei or areas of their brain that have atrophied. And so then you got to dive down this route to figure this out. The cool part, by the way, the CIRS protocol, Shoemaker protocol, is regrowing brain matter in the brain, is reversing brain atrophy. So it's 100% possible. The next step that can be a piece of this for some of us is a process called GENIE, which is a blood lab. It's transcriptomics. So really what they're doing is they're measuring gene expression of immune reactive genes. So which genes are turned on that have been triggered that are causing immune reactivity. So you can do a GENIE and it can actually show you, see these are the next ones. Yeah, it can actually show you the expression of immune reactivity. So if you want to get really detailed, this will show you what immune genes are turned on and which ones are not. Down to, you look at some of these categories, your metabolism, insulin, coagulation, cytokines, so inflammation. Is Lyme turned on? There's trauma genes in here. We've got histamine, CIRS biomarkers. There's a variety of them on here. And so you can actually do this and find out, oh, endotoxin is mine, now I gotta go after that. Actinos is mine, now I gotta go after that. This is the most expensive diagnostic test that exists in this process, which is why we don't necessarily recommend it for everyone. However, the more education on it for the right people, this might really help unlock the code of exactly what's going on and truly eliminate the guesswork.
So in that one, like
Yeah.
that's a sample report, and the ones that are colored are the ones that are shown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you do this, they will send you the report. They will call you and do a consultation with you to explain what all that means and what you can do with treatment. And they're at a point now that with treatment, they're doing pre and post GENIEs with the Shoemaker protocol, and we're seeing inflammatory genes turn off. So this will go from lit up in red to down to white in little colors as you go through the process.
How much is it besides distance?
So the test itself is $720. You have to ship it on dry ice, and so you're going to be close to like $900 to $1,000 for the test all said and done. They do offer bulk test discounts, so this is something that people are interested in diving into this. You can talk to us about it and we can order multiple tests at once to save everybody some money as you go through it.
Nice, and you just ship all of them in the same little dry ice
Yeah,
box?
you can do, they actually literally tell you to do that, put them in one dry ice pack box, so it saves everybody on the shipping and the price of the test.
How much is the quant, whatever
The Neuroquant, so through Reyes Radiology, you know, Dr. Cosgrave and I have sent multiple of these orders in. If you're cash pay, it's $500. Some insurances are covering them, just like any other type of MRI. Got a couple patients get it covered. But I use them. We've used them. One, they're faster. Their reads are the best out there. And just financially, if you try to do the same thing through your IHCs and reviewers of the world, they're going to charge 2 to 3x, if not more. So you cannot do this at Taylor MD, which is, for those of you who don't know, Taylor MD charges a flat $399. You can walk in and get an MRI without an order. They will not do this. It's a post-processing procedure and it has to be done at the time of the MRI. So if you've had a brain MRI done in the past, we can't go do it. You got to do it again. So we have to write the order very specifically, and it has to be done right then and there. They send us the results. We plug it into an interpretation, and it gives us the CIRS interpretation of the Neuroquant. Good question. Okay. So this is what your brain looks like in an MRI. So we kind of just talked about this, about what it talks about, what it does. It helps because it gives specific causation, or more helps us narrow down causation of what's actually going on. It will tell us that there are places that there's atrophy in the brain due to this. And again, if money's no issue, the reality is you get this, you go through treatment for several months, and then you do it again, and you will see these areas regrow. You will see the atrophy go away. You will see these changes happen in the brain. So,
Can I comment?
yeah.
For me, knowing which areas of my brain gave validation to my behaviors. Like,
Which ones?
I think all of them were checked off on the list, actually. But it was like, as he sent me when he was at CIRS, like, okay, this is a piece of your brain that's shown up on here. And these are the symptoms of that. And I'm like, there actually is something. It's not just me thinking I'm crazy. There's legitimately something. And it's also motivating for me to recommit to doing certain things that will help heal that. That it's not just like this discouraging, oh, my life's over. It's no, I actually can take action to heal this. So.
Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. Marcons. Let's talk about this for a second, because we've nasal swabbed a lot of you guys like you thought you never have to after COVID was over. So Marcons is basically a strain of staph that lives in your nose that is antibiotic resistant. The two Dr. Cosgers in the room can talk way better about antibiotic resistance than I can. The reality is a lot of the bugs that we're trying to fight just don't respond to antibiotics the way they used to. So Marcons lives way up in your nose. And the way that I explain it to people is it's like a sprinkler drip system of inflammation that drips into your brain and the rest of your body and just lives up there until you kill it. And so about 70% of CIRS patients will be Marcons positive. The other thing about CIRS about Marcons is it can produce a biofilm. The easiest way to think about a biofilm is it produces like a force field around it so that it's even harder to kill. And so then it lives up there with little force fields around it, and you can do all the stuff and it's not going to do anything, and it just keeps leaking into your brain and the rest of your body. So the Marcons test, what?
No, it's force field.
I thought it was pretty good.
You like scrub.
But literally and it's part of this response to antibiotic resistance. These bacteria have learned to do things so that they don't die and they can't get killed. And so there are validated ways to do it. And this is a stage in the process. So if you do test positive, you can go through it. And we use what's called a BEG spray, which has been proven compared to some of the others out there. And it's a mixture of an antibiotic and EDTA, which is a chelator, and the combination of the two. In fact, I just listened over the weekend to a talk given by the clinician who created this lab of how they decided to get to this and how they're testing for it. The top 4 reasons, so that was shared at a conference that people are not getting through Marcons treatment is not removal from exposure, not removal from exposure, not removal from exposure, and not removal from exposure. So the question comes up, if you're positive for Marcons, should you be doing these things to treat it if you're not out of exposure? The short answer is that's a complicated question. The easier answer is doing the treatment will help decrease your symptoms. You just might have to do it longer while you're working on exposure. Yes.
Are there negative effects of being on those antibiotics long term?
Not that they've shown so far. Nope. And the average person gets through this within 30 to 60 days. So you're not on this for like long time. Nope. So good question. Okay. Let's talk about this. I think this is one of the things a lot of people came for tonight. And again, Dr. Crossgrave, Corbin, I've been talking to the lead doctors of CIRS for over a year now. And the number one hardest thing about getting through this is dealing with the structure of the home or dealing with exposure. Homes are the most common. We've talked about this, but secondary and tertiary buildings are tough too. Most schools in our country are water damaged buildings. So you want to go back to the slide about ADD, ADHD, et cetera, learning disabilities, and how they're tied to this. It's because we build schools with flat roofs and they don't report anything and there's no budgets to fix them. And we live in schools, they keep them around. You guys are getting a new one. But they keep schools around for like 50 years and then we're all gone and have problems because of it. I will tell you, our daughter, we took out of elementary school, and the moment she did, her behavior, her learning improved dramatically. Her headaches and a lot of her symptoms stopped. And this is not an uncommon thing. So they call it medically important remediation, and there's now certifications for this because it's remediating the home, meaning getting rid of whatever's in there causing people to be sick. Considering the patient has medical needs. This isn't just, there's water damage on that drywall, let's cut it out and get it out. So the steps are, we're going to go over those, we're going to talk through these things, and what we're doing to try and help make this easier for everybody. So where the Envirobiomics Home Swiffer Kit helps is it helps us show, is there a problem in your house or not? If it comes back negative, we know it's not your home, so it might be something else or somewhere else. Then using a validated inspection company to come in and say, once you said, hey, there's something in my home that's making us sick, now they're going to come find out where it came from and the extent of the damage that was caused by that. This part is key. The person doing the inspection company is the one that should be writing the remediation and renovation plan, and then vetting out and working with those two companies to do proper sequencing step by step as far as cleaning, retesting, and getting the house safe and medically clean and remediated for people to live. This is the #1 company that's doing this for CIRS approved. They're currently not in Utah. I'm working with the owner of the company to see if they can come and do things for us here. If nothing else, they've told us if we get a list of a number of people or they can pack inspections into a week, they'll send a rep out to do that. But going back to what we talked about earlier, it's having people who are experienced in knowing how to do this and knowing how to do it appropriately saves everybody time and money in the long run. So we're working directly with the owner of this company to come and at least, if nothing else, do it for us and our patients. If nothing else, bring them here so that us and other clinicians that are working on this have viable resources to use.
You know about how much they charge?
I actually don't know, because, again, it depends on how in depth they have to go. But I don't know, but again, I have a call with the owner this week to try and dive through all of that information.
We can send out an email update.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated. And here's the deal, like, you know, we talked about this today. If you can Google mold remediation companies, you're gonna come up with dozens of them in the area. I've talked to several, and if you ask them to do this, a lot of them won't. It's too much work, it's outside their bounds, and they don't care. And so the president of this company presented, this is what the sequence should be looking about. You have to do the inspection, testing, and fact finding. You gotta know where things are. You also have to inspect the HVAC system. Is it leaking? I can't remember the percentages, but there's something like, I don't know, do you remember, they said something like 60 or 70% of the air in the HVAC never gets to the end of the row because it heats. And it's leaking behind walls, and it can cause humidity and growth and all those types of things. Let alone whatever it's bringing in from the outside to inside, and spreading that around. Creating the appropriate plan, gross remediation, that's what we think of, the cutting out of the wet drywall or whatever. And then they talk about the demolition and reconstruction of planned renovations. So do we have to rebuild a wall? Do we have to do whatever? This is where it gets specific to your home, and this is why no two remediations are the same. What's interesting that I found in this process is that the HVAC cleaning and duct leakage sealing is second to last. We've had patients that have done this early, and then they go through and do the remediation, but all that dust that they just kicked up from the dirty stuff just went straight into their HVAC. So you clean out the building and remediate and renovate the building, you do the ducts last. And then the small particle cleaning is what we're talking about with the actinos and all these other things, where they go through a multiple phase cleaning process of all the surfaces in the area to make sure everything's dead and gone. So this is a very detailed process. And like I said, we are going to work with these companies to vet out who are the right people willing to do this and do it the right way for the patients who need it. So again, you go back to the beginning, this is a bigger issue than just people sitting in this room. And if this is the hardest thing to overcome, we better have good resources. And so again, the medical part is proven and validated. This is the part that's harder. Okay, we're gonna switch gears for a second, and then we'll have time for questions at the end about anything. So I want to talk about some of the functional medicine support that we do here, and we're not alone in this, but during the Shoemaker protocol. The Shoemaker protocol is proven and validated, but it doesn't mean that there's not other things that we have to do to help you get through this, such as help heal and repair the gut. Work on hormones, work on thyroid, work on whatever else might be coming up through the process. I want to talk about a couple of the things that we do here. And we do all those things that we just talked about. A lot of our patients are doing hyperbarics and ozone therapy. I'm going to skip to some slides and then come back. We won't get in, this isn't a presentation about what those are doing physiologically. The best way that I explain to people is they're the best firefighters for inflammation, and they're the best rebuilders for your immune system. And they do that through a number of different ways, especially when combined and stacked. I want to share, we shared some data that we just looked at of our patients that have been doing HBOT and ozone IVs. This number shows just HBOT. But TGF beta 1 is one of this trans growth factor beta 1 is one of the inflammatory markers that is crucial to CIRS that needs to come down. The goal is below 6,622. So we took 11 patients that have been going through this process. You can see everybody's starting point. We have patients that are over 30,000 and they're supposed to be below 6. And this shows their lab redraws at different points and how they had a huge decrease as they got into doing more in each spot, and then IVs we could layer on top of this. Because most of these patients, all of these patients were doing ozone IVs at the same time. What's impactful about this, and I'll show you 2 others, is to my knowledge, every single one of these patients on this graph were still in exposure. And so, and I presented this there, and I talked to a number of people offline, and people couldn't believe me offline that we were getting people to decrease this much while they were still in exposure. So to me, this becomes early proof or evidence for what we're doing here. That step number 1 is hard and not a short process. And so the question of, does it even worth it to start? Is it even worth it to treat? Is it even worth it to blank when I'm still in a home that might be immune reactive? And the answer is, we're getting people to progress and get better even while they're still there. And there's a couple sitting in this room who have progressed dramatically over the past 6, 7, 8 months. And one I know for sure, because they have a home test, is living in exposure and has seen dramatic health changes with these supports for the Shoemaker protocol. This is another one. So MMP9, this is a biomarker, an inflammatory marker that only elevates when you're in exposure. This one, you can see the lines are a little bit different. This is the range that we're trying to get people in, but overall, you know, we're seeing people stay pretty steady or even decrease while they're in exposure through our care. And this last one, these are 3, because they're 3 of some of the big inflammatory biomarkers due to biotoxins. This stands for complement C4A. These 2 patients I know had recent exposure events, but all these other ones saw decreases in this complement C4. By the way, dealing with all 3 of these are later steps in the Shoemaker protocol. If we're able to handle them early on, then you just don't ever have to do that step in the protocol. So I wanted to share these tonight because it was evidence to us that what we were doing is accelerating the patient experience and the healing experience, even while we're still trying to figure out step 1. And you can get better, you can improve, you can see a better life, you can see symptoms go away. It's not short and it's not easy, but you can do it. Would you say you're in a totally different life now than you were 8, 9 months ago?
I don't know if I sort of dared to pray that I could be as doing well as I am right now. And I'm still in exposure, and I've been here doing treatments for like 8 months, right? It's been a really huge deal.
Thank you. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
It's okay.
So to me, that's significant that there are options out here that are not necessarily in the Shoemaker protocol that, in my mind, we're boosting it, we're helping it, we're getting people to a place where they can see healing and change while we're trying to figure out step 1. You know, I'll talk to some of these clinicians that have done this, you know, worked with thousands of patients, and they're like, oh, it's like, they're saying, it's like, oh, it's super easy when they're out of exposure. I think easy is a weird term. It's still not fast, but you're not figuring out how to handle your home in the first 2 weeks of care, right? This might take months and or years to figure out. And if we can get you 90% of the way through so that you can actually have the capacity to figure out what to do, that's huge. A couple of the other things we talked about, one of the other things that's not on here that I'd like to talk about too, that I feel strongly about, that one of the things we emphasize huge here is helping to teach your body how to detox and how to get rid of all of this stuff. And we use a number of different things: far infrared sauna, pocket, low presso, these tools that we use that help to teach your body how to collect and get rid of all the stuff that's in there making you sick. We don't have data on it yet, but I would argue those things dramatically are helping us get through this process. The patients that have started doing some of these, I think would say anecdotally that they are seeing improvements and feeling better by helping their body detox and get through this. Because the reality is, if you've been in a chronic health state for a long time, it's because your lymph isn't moving and your body doesn't know how to get rid of all the bad guys. So as we teach it how to do that, you're going to see improvements. The how longs on these two are interesting questions. We kind of addressed BEG. The short answer is, as I've learned the longer I go through this, no two patients are going to have the same timeline on taking the CSM, which is the medication to help remove the biotoxins, and the Marcon spray. Most people are going to be 30 to 60 days. But even that, as I was listening to the lab creator for this test, he said the most common reason why somebody out of it, other than exposure, that someone doesn't pass a re-Marcon swab is they got another strain, and that's from a partner, and then 6 out of 100 times a dog. Yeah.
Oh, can you just give our dog away? We've had a lot of patients say that they pass the BCS and they stop to the CSM. So that's
Okay. So the early education on this was that's what the gauge you use to determine CSM. What everything has been pointing to lately is, do you have biomarker improvement? So are the labs showing improvement? And that's why this is different for everybody. The BCS is helpful because it shows that we're decreasing neuroinflammation. So we want you to pass the BCS, but then looking at biomarkers, and are you still getting those? And the other answer is, if you're in exposure, you should still be taking CSM because it'll help keep your symptoms at bay. People ask what to do when they're all done. You keep CSM around, because if you have the genetic predisposition to have an immune reaction to this stuff, I was talking about it with some people today. We've talked about it a lot with people. It's like, and even us, like I'll share a story. I went to a business conference in New Orleans earlier this year, and the moment I walked in, and it was downtown French Quarter, that place was underwater from Katrina. And like I immediately started getting symptoms. You can see black mold like around all the ceiling. So keeping CSM and a few other things with you to travel with and all those in case you get exposure is huge. So it kind of becomes part of your little first aid kit that you have going on.
Sorry, and what is CSM?
CSM stands for cholestyramine. So it's a binder. And Dr. Cosgrave in the back over here works with us with those prescriptions. A prescription from a compounding pharmacy comes in a powder and dosed appropriately for a certain amount of time. And we have some like best practices of how to take it, how to use it, those such things. BEG is a nasal spray. That's the Marcons treatment. And the last one that I wanted to talk about is NAD, which is an IV therapy that we offer here. NAD is a huge support for this in a number of different ways. NAD helps the mitochondrial health. It at its core, that's one of the main things without getting super cellular fizz here. But NAD helps our mitochondrial health. So it can help produce more energy. It can help with tissue regeneration from neurological to other. And it also is a huge detoxifier. It can help your body change that way. So people will see cognitive changes and benefits with NAD. People will see pain and inflammatory changes with NAD. Mood, NAD has been used in mental health care and things like that for years. The NAD is still actually pretty new as far as research goes. If you look into the literature, most published literature we have NAD is like chronic usage and with like advanced Parkinson's dementia patients. But it's being used now because we can and will see changes in mental cognition, brain fog, mood, pain, and it also helps to detoxify and fight inflammation. So that is another thing that we've done with a number of patients, and we're even learning more about how to use it more effectively to help create change and support through this process.
The CSM expires in powder.
I don't think we were, it probably does, I
talked
don't
to
know
the
what the date
pharmacist
is.
about this. She said, I just ordered some and the box are required to say 6 months as a printed expiration date. But she said it would be good till 2027, so 3 years.
Probably sounds about right. So,
Yeah, just however the pharmacy prepares with it, especially compounded, then they would know.
yeah, so probably, yeah, 2.5, 3 years from now, but I would ask if they have to put an expiration date on it shorter, but you can hang on to that stuff. So, okay. That's what I had to share with you guys tonight. I know it's a lot. Hopefully that sheds some light, answers some questions. And being transparent with you, a lot of the home inspection stuff, we don't necessarily have like, and here's the number to call these guys today. My goal is by the end of this week that we'll have that. And I'm aggressively doing the work to make these relationships for all of you. Because we are working our butts off with each of you guys on the medical side. And each of us, and listen, those of you that don't know, me, my wife, and my 2 oldest kids all have CIRS. So we live with this stuff too. We live with the silent stuff too. And we need to know how to do this also. And people have asked us, like, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, I don't know, because we're having the same conversations at 1 o'clock in the morning. If we move, do we renovate? Do we what? Like, I don't know. And I can't answer that for anybody because the answer is different for anybody. But what we know is, we know there are ways to do this appropriately and do it right. Because I can tell you, I know I don't want to live in a home anymore that's making my family sick. And you talk to the doctors that have treated this for a long time, and I see it and we see it. And Dr. Doringer will tell you and tell everybody, this is a disease of irritability. This is a disease of broken relationships. This is because it actually affects frontal lobe function and decision making and relationship building and anger and all those types of things are very real. And so, so I'm going to do whatever it takes to figure this out. So because I'm sick and tired of living in a home or I'm watching that happen to my family members. And so, and you all deserve that too. So being 100% transparent, I've done the work here in the state to find these people and they don't exist. So we're trying to create an option for everybody because we need it here. So, and with that, any other questions that you guys have? And I understand this just like dumped tons of information on you. And so if you think about it, we can answer them later. Yeah.
So I've heard that you suggest 4 NADs. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, so we're actually working with a new nurse who has been working very closely with NAD for the past 3-4 years and has done way more research than I have, probably more than most people, I would say, around, and has literally experimented with probably 100 different ways of doing it and mixing it with the literature to learn if you are NAD suppressed. And a short way to think about NAD is it's a very important ingredient in all the chemical equations that produce energy. That's the easiest way to think about it. And so, so the kind of the old dosing, and this was not just the way we did it, but the way it's kind of still being done out there. There's this number that was around that everybody needed 500 milligrams of NAD. And the short answer is it depends. And so what she has had good success with, I've gone through it with her, is a progressive loading of NAD, because also you've done it. And to do 500 milligrams in one shot for most people, it takes 3 to 4 hours because you feel it's weird to explain. You've done it multiple times. I've done it multiple times. It's like a weird heaviness, kind of fogginess, sort of nausea, not really. Yeah, flu-like symptoms. It doesn't feel good going through it, but it's hard to describe. And so it was taught to put it in very slowly because of that. The crazy part is, as soon as the drip's done, in like 60 seconds, you feel it all goes away. You feel totally fine. So what she's found and what we're gonna start doing is over 4 weeks, you can increase the dosage slowly each time. And then everybody kind of finds their number of, hey, when you do 300 milligrams, I feel amazing and I feel good for months at a time or weeks at a time. So it's a loading phase to figure out what your tolerance is. Very few people need more than the 500 dosage. Some people will need less. And so, and because that it can be pushed a little bit faster, I've had her do 250 in me in under 45 minutes. And it's almost kind of like you grin and bear the crappy for like, but literally as soon as it's done, within a minute or two, you like, now I feel fine, you feel better. So it's proving to have a better reception and a better long-term benefit. And then at the end of the fourth, like say 300, you're like, man, I feel amazing at that. Then as you try to space it out to where you don't need it as often, or it's I'm going to travel and I need it, or I'm having a little bit of a dip and it'll help bring you out. But it's helping with chronic pain, it's helping with mood, it's helping with this, it's helping. I'll tell you my experience. I've had this weird knee pain stuff I've been trying to figure out since January. And there are days that it's literally 7 to 8 out of 10, can't squat, can't stairs, can't kneel, can't sit, stand. And the very first time she did it, within an hour, it was down to 2 to 3 out of 10. And that lasted for about a week or more. And I was able to do more things. So it has an effect in a number of different ways. So yes.
Is NAD something you start people at the beginning of care, or you want to get them to a certain point
Probably not in the
before you
beginning,
introduce NAD in?
and it depends on the person, but a lot of times, as you guys know, the first phase, we have to get your body to eliminate biotoxin and get this stuff out and rebuild the immune system. You could start it right away, but I think for a lot of people, you would not see the benefits of it until we built you up a little bit as we go. And I would say you'd probably agree. We didn't start it for you for a couple months in. And I think if we started at the beginning, you probably would have seen change, but probably shorter and not as long lasting. So
You did that on her when she was like plateau.
yeah, and it really helped right through that. So good question. Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah, if you pass the CFM, you take the same dosage that you're taking all along.
Mm-hmm. Until we can redraw labs, see how your biomarkers are changing. Yep. Good question. Anything else? I know you'll probably, if you're like me, I think some of you heard me say this speech, like you're gonna walk out of here and go, should have asked this.
So a home test is first, she did that decision.
Yeah, and we're working with them too to see if they can get us a discounting for people, but yeah, you order the kits, they get to your home in a couple days, do the swipe stuff. Jenna has done it, Courtney has done it, you guys have done it, so there's people that you guys have done it, so there's people you can ask to make sure you're doing it right. But I would definitely start. And look, I have had some patients come back where the home has come back negative. It's great. But now we just know we don't have to worry about it. If it comes back positive, then it's just a conversation of what that means and what we can do. So,
See, that's the interesting thing for us right now too, because we have lived in 3 homes in the last 10 years. One we got kicked out of because it was infested with mold. The second one, our crawl space flooded and had mushrooms growing in the carpet. So we know for sure 2 of the last 3. Now this home that we're living in now did have mold. It was remediated and it doesn't smell like mold, it doesn't look like mold. So that's where for us, if there is an issue in this home, it's probably the actinos. It's probably the dog, betting on the dog. Corbin said he'd take care of it. Don't worry, I won't actually do that. But it's like this journey that we've gone through. I'm just hoping that this house that we're in right now is good. But if it's not, then we're gonna do the same thing. And like, we're driven to help you, but we also wanna figure it out so that our little kids are okay, you know? So we're hunting down the right answers here.
So,
Yeah.
the MRI sooner than later.
So short answer is yes. I mean, we can order it, you can go do it. Like I said, I did it, Mac did it, Dana did it. It's just like any old MRI. And your experience there is no different, other than
They get more
it
data
is
back.
close to your face and makes weird sounds.
Yeah, but you don't have a brain, that's the only thing you want.
Don't sneeze while you're in.
Well, that's.
So yeah, we just let us know, we order it, and it has to be ordered with the right language, so that they give us the Neuroquant data, and then we just plug that in and just have a conversation about things. So
I have a couple key questions. Do you have the soap? The bed soap?
I don't have any. I'm asking if they'll send us some samples and send us a discount code, and if we can carry some in stock. So we should know by the end of the week, what's possible.
Okay, we have a couple people wanting to know how to test for the skin bacteria.
Yeah, so it's the same company, Envirobiomics, test 21. So, and it's an ear swab, so you can pull back your ear, and it's a Q-tip that you rub and roll, and you can hear, put back in a little tube and send it off.
Practically a COVID.
It looks like a COVID.
So does that come with the kit?
That comes with kit 21. Yeah,
Do you have everyone in your home do it?
I would.
If you have high.
We're going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much is test 21?
I think it's 195.
Because you want the plus.
Actino Skin Plus.
Yeah, so it comes with this. I don't know, I haven't figured that, there's words like that here.
So it doesn't.
No, they're separate. That's why, like, and this came up when they were presenting, we were talking about when you set that Actinos, is like, you dive in to do all this stuff in the beginning. And I've heard him say it 100 times. Dr. Dorner said, if I'm treating Oprah, the answer is yes. Meaning if you're treating somebody where money's no question, it was like do all of them so you have clear. The reality is we can know and be actionable on a lot with just a VCS and labs and home test. The rest of it is where if the home test comes back and actinos are high, then we better look at some other things. Better look at a skin swab is probably the next financially viable place. If you actually really want to dive down to find out if that is it, a Neuroquant and a Genie will tell you exactly. And this is where I stood, and we've talked about this dozens of times. It's really easy to get lab excited. Meaning, let's go do every test in the book. The short answer is for most people, resources are finite to a point. And what do you actually need to be actionable on? And if we're suspicious, then it's just, let's just do some of the things anyway, and just, they're probably gonna help. But I will tell you, we talked about this a lot, and we talked about it weekend, we talked about it since in the early days. Neuroquant for me was kind of, if we couldn't, it might become one of the things we do for everybody to start. Just because it will direct us to think more Actino during those times as well. And it has a compliance type factor too. You can say actually, especially with people who've been in the Lyme community for so long, and I've seen multiple now patients who thought they had Lyme, but it comes back and says that it's almost all something else.
It's completely changed how I thought about me.
So I would do the brain MRI and the skin swab, but the skin swab is very helpful if you have the home test that says you have high actinos. Because if you have a home test that says you don't, it's not worth it to do that.
the MRI tells you,
It can tell us a lot more.
so you get that first.
And if your insurance
Yeah.
helps with that, that's one of
It
the
could lead us
things.
to that too, either way.
But you would know if it's in the home from the MRI.
No, you wouldn't know if you're bleeding. So the home test is huge. Yeah, that's definitely the first of the two that I do. Yeah,
So if your Neuroquant is showing not mold, can you go right to the swab, or do you still need to do the home test?
so we need a home test, because we talked about
Because
this.
it could be the-
So all it's showing on mold is if the brain atrophy is due to mold. That doesn't mean that your immune reactivity in all the areas of your body are not due to mold. And so, and especially if you have a mold susceptible gene, you better for sure as heck know that that's not in your house. So I would still do the test, and because of yours in particular, we know we might need to look at a couple things, but I would do the home test for sure. Yep. Yes.
If it's Actinobacterias, let's say, the test positive, you do the soap, is the home just gonna clear up naturally and no one's sucking Actinobacterias anyway?
Yeah, so this is where like small particle cleaning, like short answer is yes, but then doing some cleaning throughout home, and there's. So the early things that we know about this, and they're doing some testing to find out exactly, but like hypochlorous acid is huge with this. They don't know for sure, but I have some questions. The Defense Soap guys make mat cleaner to clean the wrestling mats. I have asked them, I have not heard back if that can be used to clean floors and walls and stuff in your home. Because if it's killing all the stuff on the mat, it might as well kill it in your home as well. The iAdapt has been very promising.
That's the Air
That's the
Oasis.
Air Oasis. In fact, they have multiple like trial studies of small groups of patients that are just using the iAdapt, the Air Oasis air filter in their home, and their Actino scores are going down. So, anyway,
This is- You guys have one.
Yeah.
Does anyone else bought one of these? You have one?
I have two.
Yeah,
So they have them for different sizes of rooms. And like I said, they're 25% off or more. They do sales fairly frequent. Guys,
so here's the hack, by the way, in case you're interested. Through the end of tonight, there's only a couple of them that are on the Memorial Day sale for 25% off. If you use the promo code CIRSX24, you get an additional 30% off the ones that are already on sale. So we just bought them.
we're gonna put some here.
So those going into his room is not a filter that goes in.
Correct. It's a stand, pistons, and air filters.
And here's the deal. So I remember when I was so sick, you know, this was years ago for Christmas, my mom gave me an air filter. And it was the best thing for me. And it was not like one of these big fancy ones. It was just a simple air filter, but I noticed the difference. And I was like, they talk about Actinos on their website.
So the
And-
owner presented this year, at CIRS about why they came up with an iAdapt 2, like a new version. And basically they said all the data that was coming back from the CIRS community showed that they needed to get better. And so they actually improved it basically for the CIRS community. They sell them to everybody. And so this is actually even better at the small particle stuff like the Actinos, like the.
And they had them at CIRS X. And Corbin, who does not have CIRS, said one of the days they didn't turn it on. And he could tell a difference in the air when they didn't have them on. So for me, that was kind of like my selling point of let's just do it, pull the trigger.
So it's the iAdapt ones.
Yeah, so it's these ones right here. I think that's the only, when you go to products, they're air purifiers, it's the only one.
Okay, and the CIRS, is it all lowercase or all?
No, all uppercase, CIRS X24. You have to put it in the cart. Yeah, cause I just did it the other last night or yesterday. So you get an extra discount on top of that. So you can only use it once, by the way. I learned that the hard way. So if you use it and you buy more, have her do it.
Or can you do it on?
You can do multiple.
You can put as many as you want in a cart and then you add that code and it'll take.
We got one for every room in our house. And then we're getting one for in here, one there, one downstairs.
Yes.
Did they ever talk about ozone machines?
for killing mold or cleaning air?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because like ozone cleaners, so that would be more on the remediation side. And there's actually a lot of debate about that, and I've researched that in the past too, and there's good data on it. The thing I love about this CIRS community is they're so data driven. The thing that sometimes bothers me is they're so data driven, meaning there are things like I last year I came to them with hyperbarics, and they're kind of, well, like, we don't know, like, there's no published research on it for CIRS. And I presented on all the literature for chronic inflammatory markers and regeneration and neurological, and they're like, whoa, okay, this is real. So it's interesting in a good way that they're hesitant to let things in unless there's proven research for CIRS. Now, for that would be more of a conversation for remediation. Is the right way to kill it clean. They do use them everywhere for that. But it would be more about also removing and not just killing. That's part of that process as
Like
well.
removing the source of the.
Yeah, it's both. Which is part of the reason why, like, a lot of the lazy remediation is they come fog your house. Really, all they're doing is killing the active stuff and dropping it on all the dust things. You're just like, just send it anyway. It doesn't change anything. So.
Here's a question. How many of the air filters do you recommend for a home? Is one enough? Which do you recommend? There are 2 different ones.
Yeah, so I think on there it says by square footage. And Jenna, you did most of the research. The medium, which it looks like the 2 stack, they say is like one of the most effective ones.
So the medium cleans
By the way, we
500.
don't get, there's no financial.
Listen, if
gain
my
from
life were an MLM.
Air Oasis.
Okay, so the medium cleans 530 square feet in 12 minutes. But it also says it covers 2,650 square feet in 1 hour. They did say it does help with this, which is my dream. They did say having multiple is good because you can, cover different areas. So if you have like a huge house, you might put 2 mediums at different ends or something. That's kind of what we were talking about doing. Originally, we just said we did the biggest one and move it around in here, but I think we were talking last night about doing mediums. But so we got the small ones for each of the kids' rooms. We got the medium for our room, and then we got a big one for downstairs that we'll just kind of around. So that was our thought.
Here's the bit, like, I will tell you, I bring up his name a lot because he's been doing this for a decade, but Dr. Dorninger has become a good mentor of mine, and I've actually traveled to multiple conferences with him. He got into this. By the way, nobody gets into this unless you've been affected by it. Every doctor that treats this in the United States, which here's the other stat that's kind of crazy. There's less than 40 shoemaker certified doctors in the country. And less than that, there's probably 10 or 12 that are actually actively treating it in practice. And so, and I'm included in that. But I've traveled with Dr. Dorninger multiple times. He actually travels with an iAdapt with you. The small one. He puts it in a suitcase and brings it to his hotel room because he can't control what's happening in that hotel room. And he teaches a lot. And he's like, the last thing I need to go travel to a hotel and wake up with my brain melted and I can't teach.
Because he was a certification.
And so, they work. And we will testify to that once we get in our home and figure it out. So, anyway.
The promo code CIRSX 24, right?
Yeah.
It worked.
It worked for me.
There's 24, 25.
24. So then we apply.
Yes.
Yes, it should take an additional discount off. Yeah,
It's a great discount.
so anyway, we don't make anything off that discount. It's not our affiliation code. Anyway. Okay. Good question. Yes.
So how high do your casinos, what's that word?
Actinos?
Actinos have to be to
above 10,000, and there's two main ones, but there's a couple, and I've seen them on some people's over 800,000. If they're above 10,000, it's immune reactive. Wait a minute, you're good.
Yeah, that was ours. I was over that. We're killing it.
So that's on the test that you get back from the.
Yeah, so they'll send
So
a
if
few
you're at
reports back.
6,000, do you test?
It just depends on which one.
I
I haven't looked at yours yet.
I have it pulled up here, you can look at it after.
Well, I have a copy right here.
Well, yes. Yeah, I can look at it afterwards.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks so much for coming, you guys. This means a lot to us. And, it sounds weird, but we literally like live, sleep, dream, trying to figure out this for each and every one of you and those that aren't here, because this is affecting lives. If you look at this list, there's people on this list in all of our lives that are searching, figuring, struggling, living in silence with an illness. And it means a lot to us to commit literally our lives to figuring this out for you guys. So thanks for coming tonight. Travel safely. If you have questions, I'll hang around, we'll hang around. Thank you.